My name is Matt. I want to tell a story that happened to me not too long ago. My wife Emily and I had been married for several years, and it seemed like we had a happy family. We had our routines, our shared moments, and everything seemed stable. But something changed. It was spring, and Emily's niece, Grace, came to visit us. She was a young and attractive girl, and I couldn't help but notice her charm. Grace had such energy, such a spark in her, that it was hard not to notice. At the same time, I loved my wife, but our life gradually turned into a predictable routine. We were comfortable, but the passion that had once defined our relationship had dulled over time. The excitement, the spontaneity, it all faded away, leaving us in a place that seemed safe but uninspiring. Grace was 18, full of life, and her presence made me feel attractive again. It was refreshing to have someone so alive around, so different from the monotony that had taken over my life. Gradually, I began to feel an unexpected connection with her, and she seemed intriguing in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I tried to push those thoughts away because she was Emily's niece, almost like a daughter to us. I knew it was wrong, but the feelings were there, and they were getting stronger. She had a way of making everything feel alive again, as if a part of me that had been slumbering for years was starting to wake up. By a cruel coincidence, Emily had to leave immediately to care for her sick mother. Grace stayed behind because she needed to focus on her exams and wanted to be able to study without any distractions. I remember Emily hurriedly packing her things, and the way she kissed me goodbye was somehow off, as if she sensed something was wrong but couldn't figure out what. It was a Friday night. I went out with some friends, had a few beers, and ended the evening in the sauna. I felt relaxed and in a good mood as I walked back home, slightly tipsy. The streets were quiet, and I remember feeling a strange sense of anticipation as I approached our apartment. It was as if something was pulling me forward, some invisible force urging me through that door. When I walked in, Grace was already waiting for me. The apartment was dimly lit, and there was a warmth in the air, almost an invitation. As I entered the apartment, I barely had time to take off my shoes. The alcohol had upset my equilibrium, and everything seemed a little surreal. Then she came out of her room in a short silk robe that was half unbuttoned. On the table was a candlelit dinner and untouched plates. It was obvious that she had made an effort, but it never came to dinner. I walked over to her, put my arm around her waist, and felt a shiver run through my body. The closeness between us was electric. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about Emily. I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I was completely focused on Grace, on her warmth, her scent, and the way she looked at me. I was consumed with the desire to be with her, and all rational thoughts in my head just disappeared. I wanted to feel alive again, and she was there for me, giving me that chance. I thought of a way to rid her of her robe, and in an instant I did just that. She let it fall to the floor, and we ended up together that night. Yes, that's exactly what we did. My wife never found out. We both knew it was wrong, but there was something inevitable about that night, like we were caught up in a moment we couldn't get out of. The next morning, there was an unspoken understanding between us. We didn't talk about what had happened. The tension persisted. I felt ashamed in front of Emily, but I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Some part of me wanted to pretend it never happened, but another part of me couldn't forget how exciting it had been. Grace went back to studying, and I tried to act like nothing had changed. But deep down, I knew something had changed, and there would be no going back the way it was. It was a secret that we both carried inside of us, and that had always been underneath the surface. In the days that followed, I replayed that night over and over in my head. The way Grace looked at me, the way her body pressed against mine, it was all imprinted in my memory. I tried to focus on work, on the chores that filled my days, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that I had crossed a line I could never cross. Every time I looked at Emily, I was overcome with guilt, but at the same time I felt a strange thrill. It was as if I had touched something primal that I had missed for years. I couldn't help but wonder if Grace felt the same way. There were moments when our eyes met and I saw the same tension, the same unspoken connection between us. Emily called every day to see how I was doing, and I pretended everything was fine. I asked her about her mother, about how things were going, and she didn't suspect a thing. She trusted me completely, and that trust made the guilt even more unbearable. But at the same time, some part of me longed for more. I searched for excuses to be near Grace, to feel that rush of energy again. I knew it was wrong, that I was playing with fire, but I couldn't help it. The way she smiled at me, The way her eyes lingered on me just a little longer, it was intoxicating. One night, about a week after that night, Grace and I found ourselves alone in the living room. We were watching a movie, something light and funny, but there was tension in the air between us. I could feel her presence next to me, the warmth of her body, and it was driving me crazy. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to feel that connection again. She moved closer, her foot touching mine, and I felt my heart race. I knew I should get up, leave the room, do something to break the spell. Couldn't. Instead, I remained standing still, letting the moment stretch, letting the tension build. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes searching mine, and I realized what she was thinking. Without saying a word, she leaned toward me, her lips barely touching mine, and it was like a spark igniting a fire. I kissed her back, unable to resist, and for a moment everything else disappeared. It was just the two of us caught in a whirlwind of desire and need. We pulled away, both of us breathing heavily, and I realized we were on the verge of something we couldn't take back. But before anything else could happen, she pulled away completely, her eyes widening with realization. She mumbled something about needing to study and quickly left the room, leaving me sitting in place with my heart pounding in my chest. The things got even more complicated after that. We avoided being alone together, but the tension was always present, simmering beneath the surface. Every glance, every casual touch, it was as if it was charged, as if we were playing a dangerous game. I knew I had to stop, that I had to put an end to what was happening between us. But it was easier said than done. Grace was a constant reminder of what I had done, of the line I had crossed and the temptation that still remained. And even though I knew it was wrong, some part of me didn't want it to end. Part of me wanted to see how far we could go, how much we could get away with before it all came crashing down. Eventually, Emily came back, and life seemed to be back to normal, at least at first glance. But I knew things would never be real again. Grace and I carried this secret with us as a shared memory that was always there, lurking in the background. I tried to be the husband Emily deserved, to forget what had happened, but it wasn't easy. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying everything in my mind and wondering if Grace was doing the same. It was a heavy burden, but I had put it on myself. And no matter how hard I tried to move on, I knew that night would always be a part of me, a reminder of the choices I'd made and their consequences.